The morning sun cast long shadows across the playground of Riverside Elementary School as Maria wiped down the cafeteria tables with practiced efficiency. Her dark hands moved in steady circles, removing the sticky remnants of breakfast from the bright blue surfaces. She had been working at this school for nearly 8 years now, and every corner of the building felt familiar to her. The smell of cleaning supplies mixed with the faint scent of pancakes still lingered in the air. Maria was a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Her uniform was always spotless, her hair pulled back neatly into a bun. She took pride in her work, even though the pay was modest and the hours were long. This job allowed her to support her 2 teenage daughters back home, and that was enough for her. Through the large windows, she could see children beginning to arrive for the school day. Parents dropped them off in shiny cars. Some kids walked in groups, laughing and pushing each other playfully. Maria always enjoyed watching them. Their energy and innocence reminded her of her own children when they were younger. But her attention was drawn to one particular boy, who sat alone on a bench near the entrance. His name was Tommy, and he was 12 years old. Tommy had cerebral palsy, which affected his ability to walk and control his movements. He used a wheelchair to get around, and his speech was sometimes difficult to understand. Despite these challenges, Maria had noticed something special about him. He had a bright smile and an eagerness to learn that shone through whenever she saw him in the hallways. Tommy's mother would drop him off every morning at exactly 7:30. Maria had spoken to her a few times. She was a single mother who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. The worry lines on her face told the story of sleepless nights and constant concern for her son. She always made sure Tommy had everything he needed before rushing off to her first shift at the hospital. As Maria finished cleaning the last table, she heard loud voices coming from outside. She looked up to see a group of older boys surrounding Tommy's wheelchair. Her heart sank. This was not the first time she had witnessed this scene. The leader of the group was Derek, a tall 13-year-old with a reputation for causing trouble. He had been suspended twice already this year for fighting and disrespecting teachers. Derek was laughing as he grabbed the handles of Tommy's wheelchair and spun it around roughly. Tommy's face showed fear, his hands gripping the armrest tightly. The other boys in the group were encouraging Derek, some recording the incident on their phones. They thought it was funny to see Tommy struggle to keep his balance. Maria felt anger rising in her chest. She had seen bullying before, but something about this situation felt different. Maybe it was the vulnerable look on Tommy's face, or maybe it was the cruel laughter of the boys who should have known better. She dropped her cleaning cloth and walked quickly toward the door. The school security guard was nowhere to be seen. The teachers had not yet arrived for their morning preparations. Maria knew she was the only adult present at that moment. Her supervisor had always told her to stay out of situations involving students and to report problems to the administration. But as she watched Derek push the wheelchair toward the edge of the sidewalk, where a small drop could cause Tommy to fall, something inside her snapped. She burst through the doors and called out in a firm voice. The boys turned to look at her, surprise on their faces. Derek's expression quickly changed to one of mockery. He knew Maria was just a cleaning lady. What could she possibly do to stop them? He smirked and made a comment about her staying in her place and minding her own business. Maria walked straight up to the group without hesitation. She positioned herself between the boys and Tommy, her presence protective and unwavering. She looked Derek directly in the eyes and told him that what he was doing was wrong. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. She said that bullying someone who could not defend himself was the act of a coward, not a strong person. Derek laughed and told his friends that the cleaning lady was trying to tell them what to do. The other boys joined in the laughter, but Maria noticed that some of them looked uncomfortable. She continued speaking, her words cutting through their bravado. She told them that real strength came from helping those who needed support, not from hurting them. She said that one day they would understand what it meant to face real challenges in life, and they would remember this moment with shame. The confrontation drew attention from other students who were arriving. Some pulled out their phones and began recording. Maria did not care about being filmed. All she cared about was making sure Tommy was safe. She reached down and adjusted his wheelchair, checking to make sure he was not hurt. Tommy looked up at her with tears in his eyes and whispered a thank you that was barely audible. Derek's face turned red with anger. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. He stepped forward and said something cruel about Maria's job and her appearance. His words were meant to humiliate her in front of everyone. But Maria stood her ground. She had faced worse in her life than the insults of an immature boy. She told Derek that she would be reporting this incident to the principal, and that his behavior would have consequences. Derek laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. He said that no one would believe a cleaning lady over him. His father was an important person in the community, and he had connections. Maria would lose her job if she caused trouble for him. The other boys started to back away, sensing that the situation was becoming more serious than they had anticipated. One of them tugged on Derek's sleeve, suggesting they leave before teachers arrived. But Derek refused to back down. His pride had been wounded, and he wanted to have the last word. Before he could say anything more, a deep voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a man in an expensive suit walking toward them from the parking lot. He had just stepped out of a black luxury car. His presence commanded attention. He was tall, with graying hair at his temples and sharp eyes that took in the entire scene with one glance. The man walked directly to the group and asked what was happening. His tone was calm but authoritative. Derek immediately changed his demeanor, trying to appear innocent. He started to explain that they were just playing around, and that the cleaning lady had overreacted. But the man held up his hand, silencing him. He said he had seen enough from his car to understand exactly what was taking place. Maria recognized the man. His name was Richard Hayes, and he was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. His company owned several buildings downtown, and he was known for his philanthropy. His daughter attended this school, though Maria had never interacted with her. She wondered why he was intervening in this situation. Richard looked at Tommy and asked if he was all right. Tommy nodded, still shaken but grateful for the adult presence. Then Richard turned his attention to Maria. He asked for her name and thanked her for standing up for someone who needed help. His words were sincere, and Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. At least someone in authority had witnessed what happened. Derek tried to leave, but Richard told him to stay. He said that actions had consequences, and Derek needed to understand the seriousness of what he had done. The boy's confidence crumbled under Richard's steady gaze. For the first time that morning, Derek looked like what he really was, a child who had made a terrible mistake. As the school bell rang and teachers began arriving, Richard asked Maria if she would be willing to give a full account of what happened to the principal. She agreed immediately. Together, they helped Tommy into the school building, leaving Derek and his friends to face the consequences of their choices. Maria had no idea that this single act of courage would change not only her life, but the lives of many others in ways she could never have imagined. The principal's office felt smaller than usual with so many people crowded inside. Principal Anderson sat behind her desk, her fingers steepled as she listened carefully to each account of the morning's events. Maria stood near the window, her hands clasped in front of her, while Richard Hayes sat in one of the chairs facing the desk. Derek had been called in separately with his parents, who had arrived within 20 minutes of being contacted. Maria explained everything she had witnessed. She described how the boys had surrounded Tommy, how Derek had roughly handled the wheelchair, and how the situation could have resulted in serious injury. Her voice remained steady throughout, though her hands trembled slightly. She had never been in a position like this before, speaking up against a student whose family had influence in the community. Principal Anderson took detailed notes and thanked Maria for her bravery. She assured her that the school took bullying very seriously, especially when it involved a student with special needs. However, Maria could sense hesitation in the principal's voice. There was something unspoken hanging in the air, a concern about how this situation might unfold given the people involved. Richard Hayes spoke up, confirming everything Maria had said. He explained that he had witnessed the tail end of the incident from his car and was appalled by what he saw. He praised Maria's quick action and suggested that the school needed to recognize employees who went above and beyond their job duties to protect students. His words carried weight, and Principal Anderson nodded in agreement. After the meeting, Maria returned to her duties, but she found it difficult to concentrate. Other staff members had heard about what happened, and some came to her with words of support. However, she also noticed whispers and sideways glances from others. Change was never comfortable, and her actions had disrupted the normal order of things. That afternoon, as Maria was cleaning the gymnasium, she was approached by Tommy's mother, Linda. The woman had tears streaming down her face as she reached for Maria's hands. She thanked her over and over for protecting her son. Linda explained that Tommy had been bullied before, but it had never been this severe. She had complained to the school, but nothing substantial had been done. She felt helpless watching her son suffer day after day. Maria embraced Linda, understanding the pain of a mother who could not always be there to shield her child. She promised Linda that she would continue to watch over Tommy whenever she could. The two women stood together in the empty gymnasium, connected by their shared determination to create a safer environment for the boy they both cared about. Over the next few days, the incident became the talk of the school. Videos that students had recorded on their phones had been shared on social media, and the story began spreading throughout the community. Maria found herself at the center of attention, something she had never wanted or expected. Some people praised her courage, while others questioned whether she had overstepped her boundaries. Derek's parents were influential members of the local country club and had connections with several school board members. They argued that their son had been unfairly targeted and that the situation had been blown out of proportion. They claimed that Derek was just playing around and had no intention of hurting anyone. They suggested that Maria had misunderstood the situation and reacted too strongly. A special school board meeting was called to address the incident and discuss anti-bullying policies. Maria was asked to attend and give her testimony. The night before the meeting, she barely slept. She worried about losing her job, about the impact this might have on her daughters, about whether speaking up had been worth the trouble it was causing. The meeting room was packed with parents, teachers, students, and community members. Maria sat in the front row, her heart pounding. She wore her best dress, wanting to present herself with dignity. As people filed in, she recognized many faces. Some smiled at her encouragingly, while others looked at her with cold expressions. Derek's father, Mr. Patterson, was a lawyer who knew how to command a room. He stood before the board and delivered a passionate speech about due process and the importance of not rushing to judgment. He painted his son as a good kid who made a mistake and was now being crucified by social media and public opinion. He suggested that Maria had acted inappropriately by inserting herself into a situation that should have been handled by school officials. When it was Maria's turn to speak, she walked to the podium on shaky legs. She looked out at the sea of faces and took a deep breath. She began by explaining her background, how she had worked at the school for 8 years, how she took pride in creating a clean and safe environment for all students. Then she described what she witnessed that morning, her voice growing stronger with each word. She spoke about the fear she saw in Tommy's eyes, the cruelty and the laughter of the boys, and the real danger of the situation. She said that she understood her role as a custodian, but she was also a human being who could not stand by and watch a child be harmed. She explained that she had 2 daughters of her own, and hoped that if they were ever in trouble, someone would be brave enough to help them. The room was silent when she finished. Then slowly applause began. It started with a few people and grew until most of the room was clapping. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had spoken her truth and people had listened. Richard Hayes was also called to testify. He corroborated Maria's account and added that in his 30 years of business, he had learned to recognize character when he saw it. He said that Maria had demonstrated the kind of moral courage that was rare and should be celebrated, not questioned. He offered to personally fund additional anti-bullying programs at the school and suggested that all staff members, not just teachers, should receive training on how to handle such situations. After several hours of testimony and discussion, the school board made their decision. Derek would be suspended for 2 weeks and required to complete community service and counseling before returning to school. The board also announced new policies to strengthen their anti-bullying programs and to empower all school staff to intervene when they witnessed harmful behavior. Maria felt relieved, but she knew this was not the end. Derek's family was clearly unhappy with the outcome. As people filed out of the meeting, Mr. Patterson approached her. His face was tight with anger. He told her quietly that she had made a powerful enemy and that people like her needed to remember their place. His words sent a chill down her spine. That night, Maria lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She had won this battle, but at what cost? She thought about her daughters and the example she was setting for them. She thought about Tommy and whether he would truly be safer now. She thought about the community and how divided people seemed over something that should have been simple. Protecting a vulnerable child should not be controversial, yet here she was, caught in the middle of a storm. The next morning, Maria arrived at work early as usual. She expected things to return to normal, but instead she found a note taped to her locker. The message was cruel and threatening, warning her to stay away from students and mind her own business. Her hands trembled as she read it. Someone did not want her to forget that there were people who disagreed with what she had done. She reported the note to Principal Anderson, who assured her that the school would investigate. Security cameras would be reviewed, and anyone found responsible would face consequences. But Maria knew that not all threats could be caught on camera. Some dangers were more subtle, harder to prove. Throughout the day, she noticed changes in how people treated her. Some teachers went out of their way to thank her and express their support, but others avoided eye contact, uncomfortable with the controversy she had stirred up. The other custodial staff were split in their opinions. Some admired her courage, while others worried that she had made their jobs more difficult by raising expectations. Tommy, however, was different. Whenever Maria saw him in the hallways, his face would light up with the biggest smile. He started waiting for her near the cafeteria every morning, wanting to say hello before class. His mother sent Maria a beautiful thank you card with a gift certificate to a local restaurant. These small gestures reminded Maria why she had taken a stand, but the tension continued to build. Anonymous complaints about Maria's work performance began appearing. Someone claimed she was not cleaning thoroughly enough, that she was spending too much time talking to students instead of doing her job, that she was creating a disruption in the school environment. Maria knew these complaints were fabricated, but they were part of a strategy to undermine her position. Richard Hayes learned about the harassment Maria was facing. He called Principal Anderson and expressed his concern. He reminded her that Maria had acted heroically and deserved protection, not persecution. He warned that if the school did not stand behind Maria, he would withdraw his financial support for their programs and make the situation public. His intervention bought Maria some breathing room, but she knew it also made her more dependent on his goodwill. As the weeks passed, Maria tried to focus on her work and ignore the undercurrent of hostility from some corners. But she could feel the pressure mounting. One evening, as she was locking up the school, she found her car tires slashed in the parking lot. She stood there in the gathering darkness, staring at the damage, feeling a mix of fear and frustration. Someone was trying to intimidate her, to make her life difficult enough that she would quit. Maria called the police to report the vandalism, but the officer who arrived seemed skeptical that it was connected to the school incident. He suggested it might have been random teenagers causing trouble in the area. Maria knew better. The timing was too convenient, and the parking lot had security cameras that mysteriously had not been working that evening. She filed the report, anyway, creating a paper trail that might become important later. The next morning, Maria took the bus to work. Her car was being repaired and the cost would set her back financially. She sat by the window, watching the city pass by, wondering if standing up for Tommy had been a mistake. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered the fear in his eyes and knew she had done the right thing regardless of the personal cost. Richard Hayes heard about the vandalism through the school grapevine. He was furious. He made some phone calls and within days, he had arranged for enhanced security cameras to be installed throughout the school property, including the parking lot. He also quietly hired a private investigator to look into who might be targeting Maria. His resources and determination began to shift the balance of power. Meanwhile, Tommy was thriving in ways his mother had never expected. With Derek suspended and other potential bullies warned about consequences, he felt safer at school. His grades improved and he participated more in class. His teachers noticed the change and commented on how much happier he seemed. Maria would see him in the hallways, and they would exchange smiles. Those moments made everything worthwhile. But Derek's return to school after his suspension created new tension. He had completed his community service at a senior center and attended counseling sessions. But whether he had truly changed remained to be seen. On his first day back, students and staff watched him carefully. He kept his head down and avoided eye contact with most people. When he passed Tommy in the hallway, he looked away quickly clearly uncomfortable. Maria observed Derek from a distance. She did not hate the boy. In fact, she felt some sympathy for him. He was a product of his environment, raised by parents who taught him that power and connections mattered more than character. She hoped the consequences he faced would teach him something valuable, but she remained cautious. Derek's parents, however, had not forgiven or forgotten. Mr. Patterson used his legal connections to dig into Maria's background. He discovered that she had immigrated to the country 15 years ago, and like many immigrants, her paperwork had some minor irregularities that had since been resolved. He tried to use this information to discredit her, suggesting to school board members that the school employed people with questionable backgrounds. When Richard Hayes learned about this tactic, he was disgusted. He called Mr. Patterson directly and told him that trying to destroy a hard-working woman's reputation because his son faced consequences for bullying was beneath contempt. He made it clear that if the harassment continued, he would use his own resources to expose every skeleton in the Patterson family closet. The conversation was heated, but it had an effect. The direct attacks on Maria slowed down. However, the damage to Maria's peace of mind had been done. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering who might be working against her. The stress affected her sleep and her health. She lost weight and developed tension headaches. Her daughters noticed the change when they video called and expressed concern. Maria tried to reassure them, but they could see through her brave face. One afternoon, as Maria was cleaning the library, she overheard a conversation between two teachers. They were discussing how the school had become too focused on political correctness and special treatment for certain students. One of them said that students like Tommy required too many resources and made it harder to maintain academic standards. The other agreed, adding that the whole bullying incident had been blown out of proportion. Maria felt her anger rising. She wanted to confront them, to tell them how wrong and harmful their attitudes were. But she also knew that getting into another confrontation would only make her situation worse. She quietly finished her work and left the library, but their words stayed with her. She realized that the problem was bigger than Derek or his parents. There were systemic attitudes that needed to change. That evening, Maria was approached by a local news reporter who had been following the story. The reporter wanted to do a feature piece on her, highlighting her courage and the challenges she faced. Maria was hesitant. More publicity might bring more problems. But the reporter argued that sharing her story could inspire others and bring attention to important issues about how schools handle bullying and how they treat their staff. After much thought, Maria agreed to the interview. She met with the reporter at a coffee shop near her home. For 2 hours she told her story, not just about the incident with Tommy, but about her life, her journey to this country, her struggles to build a better future for her daughters, and her belief that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. The feature aired on the local evening news and was shared widely on social media. The response was overwhelming. Maria received hundreds of messages of support from people across the city and beyond. Parents thanked her for protecting their children. Teachers expressed admiration for her courage. Other custodial workers and service employees said she had given them inspiration to speak up about problems they witnessed. But the attention also brought criticism. Some people accused her of seeking fame and making herself the victim. Online trolls sent hateful messages. A small but vocal group argued that she had overstepped her role and created unnecessary drama. The negativity was hard to ignore, even though it was outnumbered by positive support. Richard Hayes watched the news feature from his home office. He was impressed by Maria's eloquence and authenticity. She had not tried to paint herself as a hero or to attack anyone. She simply told the truth about what she saw and why she acted. He realized that this woman possessed something rare in his world of business and wealth, genuine integrity unburdened by self-interest. The next day, Richard called Maria and asked if she would meet him for coffee. She was surprised but agreed. They met at a quiet cafe downtown. Richard explained that he had been thinking about the incident and its aftermath. He said he wanted to do something meaningful to support not just Maria, but all the people who worked behind the scenes to make schools function. He told her about an idea he had been developing, He wanted to establish a foundation that would provide scholarships for children of school support staff, fund anti-bullying programs, and create awards to recognize employees who demonstrated exceptional character in their work. He said that Maria's actions had inspired this vision, and he wanted her input on how to make it effective. Maria was stunned. She had never imagined that her simple act of protecting a child would lead to something like this. She told Richard that she would be honored to help, but she emphasized that the foundation should benefit many people, not focus solely on her. She shared ideas about what would truly help people in her position, from better pay and benefits to more respect and recognition for their contributions. Richard listened carefully and took notes. He appreciated her perspective and her lack of ego. Over the following weeks, they met several more times to develop the foundation's mission and structure. Richard's lawyers drew up the paperwork, and he committed a substantial amount of his personal wealth to fund it. The foundation would be called the Guardian Foundation, recognizing all those who protected and served others in often overlooked roles. Meanwhile, at school, changes were slowly taking place. The new anti-bullying policies were being implemented. All staff members, from teachers to custodians to cafeteria workers, received training on how to identify and respond to bullying. Student assemblies addressed the issue directly, with speakers sharing their own experiences of being bullied or standing up to bullies. Tommy became something of a symbol for these efforts. With permission from his mother, he spoke at an assembly about his experiences. His speech was difficult for some to understand because of his condition, but the entire auditorium sat in rapt silence as he described what it felt like to be targeted and how grateful he was for Maria's intervention. Many students cried, and, afterwards, dozens of kids approached Tommy to offer friendship and support. Derek was present at the assembly. He sat in the back, his face unreadable. When Tommy finished speaking, the auditorium erupted in applause. Derek did not clap. He simply sat there staring at his hands. After the assembly ended and students filed out, Derek remained in his seat for several minutes. Something had shifted in him, though he was not ready to admit it yet. Maria watched all of this unfold with a mixture of hope and caution. She wanted to believe that real change was happening, but she had seen too much to be naive. Change was slow and required constant effort. Maria watched all of this unfold with a mixture of hope and caution. She wanted to believe that real change was happening, but she had seen too much to be naive. Change was slow and required constant effort. There would be setbacks and resistance, but at least the conversation had started, and people were paying attention. The Guardian Foundation was officially announced at a press conference 3 months after the initial incident. Richard Hayes stood at a podium with Maria beside him, along with Tommy and his mother, and representatives from several schools in the district. Richard explained the foundation's mission and announced the initial programs it would fund. He credited Maria for being the inspiration and emphasized that ordinary people doing extraordinary things deserved recognition and support. The media coverage was extensive and positive. The foundation received donations from other businesses and individuals who wanted to contribute. Applications came in from school employees nominating colleagues for recognition awards. Families of children with disabilities reached out, thanking Richard and Maria for shining a light on issues that often went unnoticed. Maria's life had changed in ways she never expected. She was still a custodian at Riverside Elementary, still wiping down tables and mopping floors, but now people saw her differently. Students greeted her by name. Teachers consulted her opinions on school matters. Parents thanked her when they saw her. She had not sought recognition, but she accepted it with grace, always redirecting attention to the broader issues rather than focusing on herself. The success of the Guardian Foundation brought unexpected opportunities into Maria's life. She was invited to speak at schools across the district about bullying prevention and the importance of looking out for vulnerable students. At first, she was terrified of public speaking, but with practice and encouragement from Richard and others, she became more comfortable sharing her story. During one of these speaking engagements, Maria met a woman named Patricia, who worked for the state education department. Patricia was impressed by Maria's natural ability to connect with both students and adults. She explained that the state was developing new training programs for school staff and asked if Maria would be interested in helping to design the curriculum. Maria was honored but uncertain if she had the qualifications for such work. Patricia assured her that lived experience and common sense were just as valuable as formal credentials. She said that too many educational programs were developed by people who had never actually worked in schools or faced the daily challenges that staff encountered. Maria's perspective would be invaluable. After thinking it over and discussing it with her daughters, Maria agreed to join the project as a consultant. Back at Riverside Elementary, the atmosphere continued to evolve. More students began looking out for each other, especially those who seemed lonely or vulnerable. A buddy system was established where older students were paired with younger kids who needed extra support. Tommy was paired with a sixth grader named Marcus, who took his role seriously and made sure Tommy was included in activities during lunch and recess. Derek's transformation was slower and more complicated. He had completed his mandatory counseling, but the real work of changing his attitudes and behaviors was ongoing. His parents remained defensive and bitter about how the situation had unfolded, making it difficult for Derek to fully embrace change. At home, he heard one message, while at school, he was learning another. One day, Derek witnessed a group of boys teasing a younger student about his glasses. Something clicked in Derek's mind. He remembered standing in Tommy's position, being the one doing the taunting and feeling powerful. But now, watching it from the outside, he saw how cruel and pointless it was. For the first time, he understood what Maria and the others had been trying to teach him. Derek surprised everyone by stepping in to stop the teasing. He told the boys to back off and walked the younger student to his classroom. The incident was witnessed by a teacher who reported it to the principal. Principal Anderson called Derek to her office, expecting to address another problem, but instead found herself commending him for positive behavior. Derek was embarrassed by the praise but also felt something new. Pride in doing the right thing. Maria heard about Derek's intervention through the school grapevine. She felt cautiously optimistic. True change required consistent effort, not just isolated good deeds, but it was a start. She hoped that Derek would continue on this path and eventually become someone who stood up for others rather than tearing them down. The Guardian Foundation continued to grow. Richard Hayes dedicated significant time to its operations, finding it more fulfilling than many of his business ventures. The foundation provided scholarships to 3 children of school custodians and cafeteria workers that year, helping them attend college. It funded anti-bullying programs in 12 schools, and it established the Guardian Award, which recognized school employees who went above and beyond in protecting and supporting students. Maria was asked to serve on the foundation's board of directors. She was the only member without a college degree or business background, but Richard insisted that her perspective was essential. The other board members, initially skeptical, soon came to value her insights. She had a way of cutting through complicated discussions to identify what truly mattered, always bringing the conversation back to how decisions would affect real people. Her daughters were proud of what their mother had accomplished. They had worried when the situation first escalated, fearing that their mother would lose her job or face serious consequences. Instead, they watched her become a leader and advocate for others. It taught them powerful lessons about courage and integrity that no classroom lecture could match. Tommy's progress continued to be remarkable. His confidence had grown exponentially. He participated in class discussions more frequently, joined the school chess club, and even tried out for the adaptive sports program. His mother attributed much of this positive change to feeling safer at school and having allies like Maria and Marcus looking out for him. One afternoon, Tommy's mother Linda approached Maria with tears in her eyes. She explained that Tommy had been accepted into a special summer program for students interested in computer programming. The program was competitive and Tommy had worked hard on his application. Linda was thrilled but also worried about the cost. Maria immediately told her about the Guardian Foundation's scholarship program and helped her apply. When Tommy received the scholarship, his joy was infectious. He could not stop smiling for days. During a school assembly where the scholarship was announced, Tommy wheeled himself onto the stage and thanked Maria in front of everyone. He said she had not only protected him from bullies, but had shown him that people cared about him and believed in his potential. There was not a dry eye in the auditorium. The local media covered Tommy's story, and the segment included footage of him working on computers at the summer program. He was thriving, learning advanced coding skills, and making friends with other students who shared his interests. The program instructors said he showed exceptional talent and could have a bright future in technology if he continued developing his skills. Richard Hayes watched the segment from his office and felt a profound sense of satisfaction. His wealth had always allowed him to donate to various causes, but this felt different. The Guardian Foundation was creating real change in individual lives. He could see the direct impact of his investment, and it reminded him why he had become successful in the first place, not for the money itself, but for the ability to make a difference. However, not everything was smooth sailing. Some parents in the district complained that too much attention and resources were being devoted to anti-bullying efforts and special needs students. They argued that these programs took away from academic priorities and that schools should focus primarily on teaching core subjects. Their concerns reflected a broader tension about what schools should prioritize and who deserves support. A contentious school board meeting was held to address these concerns. Maria attended, sitting in the audience and listening to parents argue about resource allocation. Some parents were compassionate and supportive of vulnerable students. Others were openly hostile, suggesting that students who could not keep up should be placed in separate facilities. The debate became heated, with accusations flying from both sides. When the public comment period opened, Maria felt compelled to speak. She had not planned to, but the callousness of some comments pushed her to act. She walked to the microphone and introduced herself. She reminded everyone that schools existed to serve all students, not just the ones who were easy to teach or came from privileged backgrounds. She pointed out that every child deserved to feel safe and supported, and that teaching students to care for each other was just as important as teaching them math and science. She shared statistics about how students who experienced bullying suffered long-term consequences, including depression, anxiety, and academic struggles. She explained that investing in these programs was not taking away from academic excellence, but was essential to creating an environment where all students could learn effectively. Her speech was passionate and grounded in both facts and personal experience. The start of a new school year always brought fresh energy to Riverside Elementary, and this year was no different. Maria arrived early on the first day, as she always did, to make sure everything was clean and ready for the students. She noticed new anti-bullying posters hanging in the hallways, colorful and eye-catching, with messages about kindness, inclusion, and standing up for others. The school felt different now, infused with a sense of purpose that had been missing before. Tommy was now in 8th grade, his final year at the elementary school before moving on to high school. He had grown taller, more confident, and had become something of a leader among his peers. Students who were new to the school or struggling to fit in often gravitated toward him because he understood what it felt like to be different. He never turned anyone away and always had encouraging words to share. Derek was also in 8th grade, and his transformation over the past year had been remarkable. He had maintained his volunteer work with the adaptive sports program and had joined the peer mediation team, where students helped resolve conflicts between classmates. His grades had improved significantly, and his teachers noted that he was more focused and respectful. The angry, insecure boy who had bullied Tommy seemed like a distant memory. One morning, Maria was organizing supplies in the custodial closet when Dr. Morrison approached her. He had a proposal that took her completely by surprise. The district was creating a new position for a student support advocate, someone who would work across schools to identify at-risk students, coordinate resources, and serve as a bridge between families and school administration. Dr. Morrison believed Maria would be perfect for the role. Maria was stunned. She had no formal education beyond high school, no degrees or certificates that would typically qualify someone for such a position. Dr. Morrison explained that the district was willing to provide training and professional development. What they needed was someone with Maria's instincts, compassion, and credibility within the community. Her lived experience and proven track record of protecting students made her ideal for the job. The position came with a significant pay increase, regular hours, and benefits that were much better than what she received as a custodian. It would change her life and provide more security for her family. But Maria was hesitant. She loved her work as a custodian, found dignity in it, and worried that accepting this position might somehow suggest that her previous job had been less important or valuable. Dr. Morrison understood her concerns. He assured her that accepting this opportunity would not diminish the value of custodial work. If anything, her willingness to take on new challenges would show other support staff that there were pathways for advancement and growth. He gave her a week to think about it and discuss it with her family. Maria called her daughters that evening and told them about the offer. They were thrilled and encouraged her to accept immediately. They reminded her that she had always taught them to embrace opportunities and not let fear or false modesty hold them back. After several days of reflection and prayer, Maria decided to accept the position. She would begin after the winter break, giving the school time to hire a replacement custodian. The announcement of Maria's new role was made at a school assembly. Students cheered, especially Tommy and the others who knew her well. Many of the staff members applauded enthusiastically, though Maria noticed a few whose expressions suggested they were less than pleased. Change always created discomfort for some people, and Maria's rise from custodian to a leadership position challenged certain assumptions about hierarchy and who deserved advancement. Richard Hayes heard about Maria's promotion and sent her a congratulatory message. He also made a generous donation to fund additional student support advocate positions in other schools throughout the district. His foundation had proven that investing in people and programs that promoted student well-being paid enormous dividends. Bullying incidents across the district had decreased by 30% since the Guardian Foundation programs began, and student reports of feeling safe at school had increased significantly. As Maria prepared for her transition to the new role, she spent time with the woman who would replace her as custodian. Her name was Rosa, and she was an immigrant from Central America who reminded Maria of herself when she had first started at the school. Maria shared advice about the routines, the quirks of the building, and most importantly, about paying attention to students and being willing to speak up when something was wrong. Rosa listened carefully and thanked Maria for the guidance. She said she had heard Maria's story and found it inspiring. She promised to uphold the same standards and to always put students first. Maria felt confident that the school would be in good hands. Tommy's mother, Linda, threw a small celebration for Maria at their home, inviting people who had been part of the journey. Richard Hayes attended, along with several teachers, Dr. Morrison, Marcus and his family, and surprisingly, Derek and his mother. Derek's father had filed for divorce several months earlier, unable to reconcile with his wife's decision to support Derek's transformation. Derek's mother had chosen her son's growth over her husband's rigid pride, and the decision had freed both of them. During the celebration, people shared stories about how Maria had impacted their lives. Teachers talked about how she had inspired them to be more aware and proactive. Students described feeling safer, knowing that adults were watching out for them. Richard spoke about how Maria had helped him reconnect with the purpose behind his wealth and success. It was an emotional evening filled with gratitude and hope. When it was Maria's turn to speak, she stood before the small gathering with tears in her eyes. She said that she had never sought recognition or advancement. All she had done was what any decent person should do when they see someone in trouble. She credited everyone in the room for being part of creating positive change and emphasized that the work was far from over. There would always be students who needed protection, families who needed support, and systems that needed improvement. She spoke about her daughters and how they had motivated everything she did. She wanted to create a world where they could thrive, where their character and effort mattered more than their circumstances or background. She thanked Richard for using his resources to amplify good work, rather than just pursuing profit, and she thanked Tommy for his courage in speaking about his experiences, which had helped so many others find their voices. Tommy wheeled himself forward and hugged Maria tightly. In that embrace was the culmination of a year of struggle, growth, and transformation. Two people from completely different backgrounds, connected by a moment of crisis, had helped each other become better versions of themselves and had inspired a community to do the same. The winter break came, and Maria spent the time preparing for her new role. She read books about child development, trauma-informed practices, and conflict resolution. The district provided training sessions, and she met the other advocates who would be working in different schools. She felt nervous but excited about this new chapter in her life. When school resumed in January, Maria began her work as student support advocate. Her office was small but functional, located near the counseling center. She spent her days meeting with students who were struggling, connecting families with resources, and working with teachers to identify early warning signs of problems. She approached the work with the same dedication she had brought to cleaning floors and wiping tables, believing that every task deserved her best effort. Word spread quickly among students that Maria was available to help. Her office became a safe space where kids could talk about bullying, family problems, academic struggles, or anything else that weighed on them. Maria listened without judgment and worked tirelessly to find solutions. She never promised what she could not deliver, but she always promised to try her best. Derek came to see Maria one day with an unusual request. He wanted to create a peer support group where students who had previously bullied others could meet, discuss their experiences, and work on making amends. He said that his own journey had been lonely at times, and he thought others in similar situations might benefit from having a community. Maria thought it was a brilliant idea and helped him get approval from Dr. Morrison to start the group. The Redemption Circle, as they called it, met weekly. Derek facilitated the meetings with support from the school counselor. Students shared their stories, discussed what had driven their negative behaviors, and brainstormed ways to make positive contributions to the school community. Some of the participants volunteered with younger students. Others joined clubs focused on service and kindness. The group became a powerful force for change from within the student body itself. Spring arrived with warmer weather and a sense of renewal throughout Riverside Elementary. The school garden that had been neglected for years was revived by a group of students inspired by the culture of care that had taken root. They planted vegetables and flowers, creating a peaceful space where students could spend time during lunch or after school. Tommy often sat in the garden working on his laptop, coding new programs while surrounded by blooming tulips and daffodils. Maria's work as student support advocate had exceeded everyone's expectations. In just a few months, she had helped dozens of students navigate difficult situations. She connected homeless families with housing resources, arranged tutoring for struggling students, and mediated conflicts between peers. Her approach was always practical and compassionate, focused on solving problems rather than assigning blame. The Guardian Foundation continued to expand its impact. Richard Hayes had recruited several other wealthy business leaders to join the cause, and together, they had raised enough money to establish similar programs in 20 schools across 3 districts. The foundation also began advocating for policy changes at the state level, pushing for laws that would require all schools to have comprehensive anti-bullying programs and adequate support staff. Maria was invited to testify before the state legislature's Education Committee. She traveled to the state capitol, nervous about speaking to politicians but determined to represent the students and families who needed these programs. She told the committee about Tommy, about Derek's transformation, and about the countless other students whose lives had been changed by having adults who were empowered to protect them. Her testimony was compelling and personal. She spoke about the custodian who noticed a child being bullied but stayed silent because it was not her job. She described the teacher who saw warning signs of abuse but did not report it because the process seemed too complicated. She painted a picture of systems that failed vulnerable children, not because people did not care, but because they lacked training, resources, and institutional support. The committee members listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. Several of them shared their own experiences with bullying or discussed challenges in their districts. At the end of the hearing, the committee chair thanked Maria for her courage and promised that they would seriously consider legislation to strengthen protections for students. Maria left the Capitol building feeling hopeful but realistic. Policy change was slow, but every step forward mattered. Back at school, graduation season approached. Tommy and Derek would both be moving on to high school in the fall. The 8th grade class was planning their end-of-year celebration, and students voted to dedicate the event to Maria, recognizing her impact on their school experience. She tried to decline the honor, insisting that many people deserved credit, but the students would not take no for an answer. The graduation ceremony was held on a beautiful June evening. Families filled the gymnasium, proud parents holding cameras and tissues. Tommy had been selected to give a speech representing the graduating class. His mother helped him onto the stage where a special podium had been set up to accommodate his wheelchair. The microphone was adjusted and the room fell silent. Tommy spoke slowly, his words sometimes difficult to understand, but everyone listened with full attention. He talked about his journey through elementary school, the challenges he had faced, and the people who had helped him along the way. He described the day that Maria had stepped in to protect him, calling it the moment when everything changed, not just for him, but for many others. He explained how one act of courage had inspired an entire community to be better. He thanked Maria, Marcus, Dr. Morrison, his teachers, and surprisingly, he thanked Derek. He said that Derek had taught him that people could change and that forgiveness was powerful. He urged his classmates to remember the lessons they had learned about standing up for each other, and to carry those values forward into high school and beyond. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Parents wiped tears from their eyes. Maria sat in the front row, overwhelmed with emotion. Tommy's mother stood beside him on stage, beaming with pride at the young man her son had become. The journey from that frightening morning in the parking lot to this moment of celebration had been difficult, but it had been worth every challenge. Derek was also recognized during the ceremony, receiving an award for Most Improved Student. When his name was called, he walked to the stage with his head held high, a stark contrast to the boy who had once slouched through the hallways radiating anger. He shook hands with Dr. Morrison and accepted the plaque. In his brief acceptance speech, he admitted that he had been on a destructive path and that several people, especially Maria and Tommy, had helped him find a better way. He pledged to continue working to be someone others could count on. After the ceremony, families gathered outside for refreshments and conversation. Maria was surrounded by parents thanking her for her work. Many had stories about how she had helped their children or connected them with needed resources. She accepted their gratitude graciously, always redirecting attention to the team effort and the importance of community support. Richard Hayes approached her with a special announcement. The Guardian Foundation Board had voted unanimously to create the Maria Sanchez Courage Award, an annual recognition for school employees who demonstrated exceptional dedication to student welfare. Maria tried to protest, feeling it was too much, but Richard insisted. He said her legacy needed to be preserved, and that future generations should know about the custodian who changed a school and inspired a movement. As the celebration wound down and families began leaving, Maria found a quiet moment to stand alone in the school garden. She reflected on the incredible journey of the past year and a half. From that morning when she had witnessed Tommy being bullied to this evening celebrating graduation, so much had changed. Lives had been transformed, including her own. She thought about the anonymous threats, the slashed tires, the attempts to destroy her reputation. Those difficult moments had tested her resolve, but they had not broken her spirit. She had discovered reserves of strength she did not know she possessed, and she had learned that standing up for what was right often came with a price. But the price of silence and inaction was far higher. Tommy wheeled himself over to where Maria stood among the flowers. They did not need to say much. He simply took her hand and squeezed it gently. In that simple gesture was profound gratitude and a bond that would last a lifetime. Maria had given Tommy more than just protection from bullies. She had given him the gift of knowing that he mattered, that his life had value, and that there were people willing to fight for him. The summer months brought new developments. The state legislature passed a comprehensive anti-bullying law that required all schools to implement evidence-based prevention programs and to train all staff members in intervention techniques. The law also established a grant program to help schools hire student support advocates. Maria's testimony had been cited in the legislative debate, and she received personal thanks from several legislators. The Guardian Foundation continued its expansion, partnering with universities to research effective strategies and creating a national network of schools committed to student welfare. Richard Hayes became increasingly focused on this work, eventually appointing a new CEO for his primary business so he could dedicate more time to the foundation. He had found his true calling in using his resources to create systemic change. Maria's daughters completed their freshman year of college with excellent grades. They both came home for the summer and were amazed by the changes in their mother's life. She carried herself with greater confidence, spoke with authority about educational issues, and had become a respected voice in the community. They told her how proud they were and how her example had inspired them to pursue careers where they could make a difference in people's lives. Derek spent the summer volunteering at a camp for children with disabilities. The work was challenging but rewarding. He learned sign language to communicate with deaf campers and developed physical therapy techniques to help kids with mobility issues. His transformation from bully to advocate was now complete, and he began thinking seriously about a career in special education or counseling. As August approached and a new school year loomed, Maria prepared to expand her work to 3 additional schools in the district. She would split her time between locations, training new student support advocates and helping establish programs. The demand for her expertise had grown exponentially, and she found herself frequently invited to speak at conferences and training sessions across the state. One evening, Maria received a phone call from a national television news program. They wanted to do a feature story about her work and the Guardian Foundation's impact. The segment would air during prime time and reach millions of viewers. Maria was hesitant about such widespread attention, but Richard encouraged her to accept. He argued that the message needed to reach as many people as possible, that other communities needed to see what was possible when people committed to protecting vulnerable children. The television crew came to Riverside Elementary and spent 2 days filming. They interviewed Maria, Tommy, Derek, Dr. Morrison, Richard Hayes, and numerous students and parents. They captured footage of the school garden, the Redemption Circle meetings, and Maria working with students in her office. The producer said it was one of the most inspiring stories they had covered in years. The television segment aired on a Tuesday evening in early September. Maria watched it from her living room with her daughters beside her. Seeing her own story presented on national television felt surreal. The producers had done an excellent job capturing not just the facts of what happened, but the emotional journey and the broader implications for schools across the country. The response was overwhelming. Maria's phone and email were flooded with messages from teachers, parents, advocates, and even politicians expressing support and asking for guidance. The Guardian Foundation website crashed from the volume of traffic as people sought information about replicating the programs in their own communities. Richard Hayes had to hire additional staff just to handle the inquiries and donation offers that poured in. School districts from across the nation reached out, requesting that Maria come speak to their staff or help them develop similar initiatives. She was invited to the White House to participate in a roundtable discussion on school safety. Major education organizations asked her to join their advisory boards. Book publishers approached her about writing a memoir. The attention was both exciting and exhausting. Despite the national recognition, Maria remained grounded. She continued her work at the schools, meeting with students, supporting families, and training staff. Every morning she would arrive early, just as she had when she was a custodian, and spend a few moments walking the hallways before the students arrived. Those quiet moments reminded her why she did this work and kept her connected to the practical reality of school life. Tommy thrived in high school. He joined the computer science club and quickly became one of the top programmers. His teachers were impressed by his skills and encouraged him to enter coding competitions. He won several regional contests, and by his sophomore year, he was being recruited by technology companies for summer internship programs. The boy who had once been afraid to come to school was now a confident young man with a bright future. Derek also excelled in high school, though his path was different. He joined the peer counseling program and became known as someone students could talk to when they were struggling. He maintained his volunteer work with adaptive sports and spent his weekends mentoring younger students. His mother often told Maria that she did not recognize her son anymore, and she meant it as the highest compliment. The angry, troubled teenager had been replaced by a compassionate young man with purpose. The relationship between Derek and Tommy evolved into a genuine friendship. They sat together at lunch, worked on group projects, and hung out on weekends. Their friendship became a powerful symbol of redemption and forgiveness. Other students saw that even serious conflicts could be resolved, and that people truly could change. The two young men occasionally spoke together at middle schools, sharing their story and encouraging younger students to choose kindness over cruelty. Richard Hayes decided to write a book about his experience with the Guardian Foundation. He worked with a professional writer to chronicle the journey from that morning in the parking lot to the national movement the foundation had become. He insisted that Maria be listed as a co-author, and that a significant portion of the proceeds go toward expanding the Foundation's programs. The book, titled The Guardian Effect: How One Act of Courage Changed a Community, became a bestseller and further amplified the message. Maria's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. She now earned a comfortable salary, lived in a better apartment, and had resources to visit her daughters at college regularly. But the material improvements, while appreciated, were not what brought her the deepest satisfaction. What truly fulfilled her was seeing students feel safe and supported, watching troubled kids find better paths, and knowing that the work she did prevented suffering and created opportunities. The Guardian Foundation expanded internationally, with schools in Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia adopting their programs. The research data was compelling. Schools that implemented the comprehensive approach showed significant reductions in bullying, improvements in academic performance, and better mental health outcomes for students. The model was working and it was scalable. Maria was invited to speak at the United Nations during a special session on children's rights and school safety. She stood before representatives from dozens of countries and shared her story. She emphasized that protecting vulnerable children should not be controversial or complicated. It required commitment, resources, and a willingness to empower everyone in the school community to act when they witnessed harm. She received a standing ovation, and several countries pledged to implement similar programs. Back home, life continued with its daily rhythms. Maria still found joy in the small moments, helping a struggling student understand a math concept, connecting a family with food assistance, or simply being a listening ear for someone who needed to talk. The recognition and accolades were nice, but the real reward was in the faces of the children she helped and the knowledge that she was making a tangible difference. One afternoon, Maria received a letter from Derek's mother. Inside was a photograph of Derek at his high school graduation and a heartfelt note. The woman wrote about how grateful she was that Maria had intervened that morning. She said that without Maria's courage, Derek might have continued down a destructive path that could have led to serious consequences. Instead, he was now planning to attend college to study social work. He wanted to dedicate his life to helping at-risk youth. The letter brought tears to Maria's eyes. Tommy's mother also stayed in close contact with Maria. Tommy had been accepted into a prestigious university with a full scholarship to study computer engineering. The school had excellent accessibility services, and Tommy was excited about the opportunities ahead. Linda often said that she thanked God every day for bringing Maria into their lives at exactly the moment they needed her most. The original Riverside Elementary continued to be a model for other schools. Dr. Morrison's leadership had solidified the culture of care and accountability. Bullying incidents remained low. Student satisfaction surveys showed consistently high marks for feelings of safety and belonging. Teachers reported that they felt supported and empowered to address problems early. The school had become a place where both students and staff could thrive. Maria was honored with numerous awards over the following years. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her contributions to education and child welfare. Universities gave her honorary degrees. Education journals featured her work. But she never forgot where she came from or lost touch with the humble roots that had shaped her character. She made it a point to attend every graduation ceremony at Riverside Elementary, sitting in the audience and watching another generation of students move forward into their futures. She looked for the quiet kids sitting alone, the ones who seemed uncertain or afraid, and she made sure they knew that someone saw them and cared about them. Her presence at the school had become legendary, and incoming students learned quickly that Ms. Maria was someone special, someone who would fight for them if needed. The custodian, who now worked in Maria's old position, Rosa, had flourished in the role. She had taken Maria's lessons to heart and had intervened in several situations to protect students. She told Maria that knowing her story gave her courage to speak up when others might have stayed silent. Maria made sure to thank Rosa regularly and to remind her that her work was vital and valued. Richard Hayes eventually stepped back from day-to-day operations of the Guardian Foundation, appointing a professional nonprofit director to lead it. But he remained deeply involved, attending board meetings and continuing to fundraise. His relationship with Maria had evolved into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared purpose. They met regularly for coffee, discussing challenges in the work and brainstorming new initiatives. One evening, during one of these coffee meetings, Richard reflected on how that morning in the parking lot had changed his life. He said that before witnessing Maria's courage, he had been successful, but spiritually empty. His business accomplishments felt hollow, but seeing her selfless act had awakened something in him, a desire to use his resources and influence for something meaningful. He credited her with giving him a sense of purpose that had transformed his life. Maria listened and smiled. She told him that she had simply done what needed to be done, but that his response had been extraordinary. He could have driven past that morning. He could have witnessed the incident and done nothing. Instead, he had chosen to get involved, to use his power to support what was right and to commit his resources to creating lasting change. She said that his actions had been just as courageous as hers, perhaps more so, because he had nothing to gain personally from getting involved. As years passed, the ripple effects of that morning continued to spread. Tommy graduated from university and was hired by a major technology company, where he developed accessibility software that helped millions of people with disabilities. He often gave interviews crediting Maria with changing the trajectory of his life. Derek became a licensed counselor specializing in working with troubled youth. He often shared his own story of transformation with the young people he counseled, offering them hope that change was possible. Maria eventually wrote her own book, focusing not on her personal story, but on practical strategies for creating safe and supportive schools. The book became required reading in many teacher training programs and School of Social Work curricula. She donated all royalties to the Guardian Foundation, ensuring that the work would continue long after she was gone. On the 10th anniversary of the incident, Riverside Elementary held a special ceremony. A bronze statue was unveiled in the school garden, depicting a woman standing protectively beside a child in a wheelchair. The plaque read, "In honor of Maria Sanchez, whose courage on September 15th reminded us that true strength lies in protecting the vulnerable. May we all aspire to be guardians for those who need our help." Maria stood before the statue, surrounded by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by her actions. Tommy was there with his wife and young daughter. Derek attended with his mother. Richard Hayes spoke about the foundation's impact, now serving over 500 schools across 15 countries. Dr. Morrison, now retired, praised Maria for setting a standard of excellence and compassion that continued to inspire. When it was Maria's turn to speak, she looked out at the crowd and saw the faces of the students she had helped, the families she had supported, and the colleagues she had trained. She spoke simply and from the heart. She said that she had done nothing special, that anyone in her position should have acted the same way. She reminded everyone that protecting children was not the responsibility of just teachers or administrators, but of every adult in the community. She urged people not to wait for someone else to step in when they saw injustice or harm. She challenged them to be the guardians that vulnerable people needed, to speak up even when it was uncomfortable, and to remember that every child deserved to feel safe and valued. She said that the real heroes were not people like her who received recognition, but the countless individuals who did the right thing every day without any expectation of reward or acknowledgement. As the ceremony concluded and people mingled in the garden, Maria found a quiet bench and sat down. She closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of roses that bloomed nearby. She thought about her journey from that frightening morning to this moment of celebration. She thought about all the people who had supported her, challenged her, and grown alongside her. Most of all, she thought about the children. Every student who now felt safer at school, every kid who had been shown that adults cared about them, every young person who had learned that they could stand up for others and make a difference. That was the true legacy, not the awards or recognition, but the lives that had been changed and the culture that had been transformed. As the sun began to set and families started leaving, Tommy wheeled over to Maria. He was now a successful adult, a leader in his field, a husband and father. But in that moment, he was the scared 12-year-old boy who had found a protector when he needed one most. He hugged Maria tightly and whispered thank you one more time. She held him close and whispered back that he had given her just as much as she had given him. The story that began with one act of courage had become a movement that touched countless lives. It proved that ordinary people could create extraordinary change, that standing up for what was right mattered, and that the simple act of protecting a vulnerable child could transform an entire community. Maria went home that evening tired but deeply satisfied, knowing that her life had mattered, and that the seeds she had planted would continue to grow for generations to come.